The first grain shipment to leave Ukraine since the start of Russia's invasion has set sail. Turkey, which has been overseeing a deal between the two countries, said it was safe for exports to resume. Here, you're about to see the Razoni loaded with corn heading into the Black Sea on its way to Lebanon. Convoys of ships are now free to leave ports like this in Odessa. A Russian blockade had sealed Ukraine's ports while Ukraine has mined the sea there to thwart Russian naval assaults. The international deal will enable Ukraine to export its stockpile of grain to the world. Many countries have experienced a shortage of grain due to the months-long war. Well, DW correspondent Matthias Bullinger is in Odessa. He told us more about the first shipments to leave the port this morning.
Yeah, the ship left its position at the port at 8:30 this morning. The ship had been stuck there since February. It's one of 16 grain vessels in Odessa that have been lying in Odessa's ports for many months now. It is now sailing on to Istanbul, where it will be inspected so that the guarantors, that's Turkey and the United Nations, and Russia can make sure that it's really shipping out grain out of Ukraine. And then it will proceed to Lebanon, where its freight is destined to. It carries more than 20,000 tons of maize that are meant to be redistributed from ports in Lebanon.
Matthias, we've been looking at satellite images of the port of Odessa, looking at the ships from where they were going to depart, and it begs the question of safety here. And who is responsible for the safe passage of these vessels, given that we know that these waters have been mined by the Ukraine side?
If you look here onto the sea, we're very close to the city of Odessa here. Not a single fisher boat is out there, and that's precisely because the waters are mined, because it is not safe to go out, and the authorities also do not allow fisher boats or private boats to go out there. So what had to happen is to open a safe corridor through the sea. That was, of course, problematic, or it was part of the negotiations, something that was very difficult to solve, because Odessa had mined its ports after Russia had started to block them in February and bring ships closer to the coast, because they were, of course, anxious that Russia might attack. What they have done now is that they have demined parts of the sea, a passageway, a lane through the sea, and the rest of the sea is still mined. So ships will have to sail along this route that has been determined by the sides, and Russia in turn has agreed not to attack them and not to attack the ports. We will see how long this deal is going to hold, but the hope is, of course, there that Ukraine will be able to get out a major shipment of their ports. It will take 4 months to get, if things go really well, it will take 4 months to get out all of the grain stocked in Ukraine's ports or near Ukraine's ports right now, and another additional 4 months for the next harvest.
Matthias, on Friday we saw an attack on a prison, killing dozens of Ukrainian soldiers held by Russian separatists. Ukraine has called for an international investigation, but Red Cross says it has not been granted access to the site. Do we know why?
Well, Red Cross should, by international law, Red Cross should have permanent access to prisoners of war on both sides. On any party that's taking part in the war, that has not happened so far. Yesterday, Russia had said it had invited the Red Cross to come in there to investigate, to also establish the names of those who were killed in this explosion, and also organize the exchange of the bodies and all these things. The Red Cross has said it had not received a formal invitation yet. This conflicting messaging out of Russia is nothing new. We often see that Russian officials might say one thing and do the other thing, might say two things at the same time that are contradictory. So that's not new. But of course, for the Red Cross to go there and to fulfill its mission and to fulfill its obligations under international law, and also for Russia to fulfill its obligations under international law, they would need to have a permission to go there that would need to be delivered to them by the Russian side.
From Odessa, Matthias Bullinger, many thanks. We return now to our coverage of Russia's war on Ukraine, which has had a huge impact on many children. About 2,000 schools in Ukraine have been damaged during the war, and scores have been completely destroyed. Our correspondent, Fanny Fashar, has visited a village in the Kiev region in northern Ukraine, where efforts are underway to help reopen the only school still standing.
Paulina has lots of time on her hands to draw, but she would love to do other things too.
I miss my friends, and I miss my teacher.
It's been 5 months now since the children were at school. The last time was in February. It was supposed to include an excursion, but it was a fateful date.
We were supposed to go to the river to see the ice melting. We couldn't make it because it was the 24th.
Paulina's mother says the lack of schooling makes her question the decision to stay in Ukraine.
I regret that I did not leave the country when my friend left. She went to Germany. It's not only about my kids, it's about all kids. They lack education.
Russian forces attacked their village at the start of the war. Their school was seriously damaged, leaving all the kids stuck at home. A wall has been fixed, but most of the windows are still broken and there's no heating. The classrooms will remain empty until basic facilities are restored. Oksana is a literature teacher.
On the first day of the war, children started to text me and say goodbye.
Returning into her old classroom is difficult. She's concerned about her students.
It's very painful when you realize that our children, we don't know what tomorrow will bring. Will there be any future? Our kids don't deserve this.
Ukrainian forces blew up this bridge to stop the Russians coming, but people here are scared of new rocket attacks. So scared, the mayor asked us not to use the name of the village in this report. The war has had a devastating effect on millions of people in Ukraine, but especially on the country's children. Returning to school would bring some level of normality to the children here in this village, but life overall still remains very insecure. Paulina and her classmates don't want to wait for the war to end to go back to school. They sell what they have and what they make to try to fix things.
We'll be able to go back to school soon. We'll raise money and the school can be repaired.
Ukrainian children are growing up quickly. Here they are fighting for their future with whatever they can find.
Now in Europe, there are concerns that Russia could completely cut gas supplies in retaliation for war-related sanctions. Those fears are being mocked by Russian media, which is ridiculing European efforts to save energy. Here's an example. This TV clip from state broadcaster Rossiya suggests measures such as skipping showers is a return to medieval times.
We want to talk about the world of microorganisms, bacteria, scabies, mites, fleas and lice. This is becoming a problem again, even in sophisticated Europe. It's as if there's a return to medieval times, when people couldn't shower, when personal hygiene was so poor that people would stink, scratch their skin non-stop, and contract unpleasant conditions.
Well, DW correspondent Yuri Resheto is monitoring Russian media. Earlier, I asked him if such messaging is to be expected.
Well, Anthony, this reaction is very typical, and you could find it quite funny if it were meant as satire, but unfortunately it wasn't. It wasn't the main news program of Russian state TV, and that is quite sad indeed. The clip goes on, and it claims that Russia has always placed great value on hygiene, and the Russian banya, in other words, the sauna, is a place of cleanliness. But the moderator doesn't say a word about the fact that old, smelly outhouses are still commonplace in most Russian villages, and toilets that don't flush and don't have running water are not uncommon even in schools. So we see a very clear contrast between good and evil, between falling Europe and rising Russia. Fear of an allegedly stupid Europe is being spread here, which is pure propaganda in its purest form.
And so does this propaganda, as you put it, have an effect on the Russians? Do viewers believe what they're being told, that people in Europe are at risk of lice infection?
Well, whether the Russians believe this nonsense or not, of course, depends on each person. Those who know Europe, who have been there, those who don't just watch TV but get their information elsewhere, these people just roll their eyes and get annoyed by such TV clips. But this propaganda also works so well because it mixes up topics that actually have nothing to do with each other. The gas issue, for example, was recently linked to the Pride parade of the LGBTQ community in Berlin. A Russian-born former member of the Bundestag from the AfD party was broadcast live, who was upset that German politicians would rather have a rainbow flag on the Bundestag and let gays and lesbians roam the city instead of giving serious thought to the cold winter. The goal here is clear: to turn conservative, homophobic Russians against Europe, against Germany. Here again, the so-called intact Christian family in Russia is contrasted with the supposedly immoral sinners in Europe. The goal here: polarize, divide, stir up hatred.
On the gas issue more broadly, Yuri, looking at this from the other angle, we know how dependent Europe is on Russian gas, but how dependent is the Kremlin itself on the billions in revenue that flow the other way?
Well, Russia is, of course, depending on exporting gas to Europe. Gas is a source of income for the Russian state, but it's not just gas. To a greater extent, oil revenues are much more important for the Kremlin, and the price of oil has been skyrocketing since the start of the war in Ukraine, and also, ironically, because of the West's partial boycott of Russian oil. So will Russia lose money by not delivering gas? Well, the answer is yes, but the short-term the economic blow will be felt much more heavily in the West, especially in Germany. Cold apartments in Europe during the upcoming winter could put a lot of pressure on governments, and I think the Kremlin knows that and sees itself as having the upper hand for now.
Yuri Brichetto, thanks so much.